everybody. This is Brady Henderson from the First Baptist Church of Gaston. You are listening to episode 117 of the Menorah podcast. The Menorah podcast seeks to share the light, speak the light, and send the light of Jesus Christ all across the airways of the internet. It's been a while. We've been going every 2 weeks, but we're going to try to get back on a schedule of every week moving forward. School's back in, sports are going, and church, hopefully, is rocking. Alan is our co-host, and he is with me today. Alan, how are you?
I'm good today, Pastor. It's good to be here. It's kind of good to get back in the swing of things. I hope that the folks that listening will pay as much attention to their church attendance as they do their kids' school attendance and all of the activities that come with fall.
Absolutely, and I hope you guys will continue to be engaged with Menorah. We're going to see how it goes this fall and in regards to your engagement and participation. I can't speak for Spotify. Probably you can better than me, but our YouTube views are much lower than they once were. So not sure if those people are on Spotify or what, but I know on YouTube we're lower than we were.
Generally speaking, we don't have a lot of viewers on the podcast directories. Generally speaking, YouTube's always done better.
Gotcha.
I do know that YouTube changed some of their policies,
Mm-hmm.
they're ever-changing policies a year or so ago, and things have kind of been different ever since. Not just for us, but a number of folks that are in a position to try to monetize. And keep in mind that we aren't. That is not a
Correct.
goal of us to monetize, but
Yeah, and in order to monetize, you got to have 1,000 YouTube subscribers. We have 419, so I don't really foresee that. Hannah asked me, it's funny you mentioned that word. Hannah asked me last week if the Swansea Tiger Sports Network YouTube channel was going to monetize. I said, honey, we only have 288 subscribers. I don't really see us getting to 1,000 there either, but if we do, with the work we do over there, monetization won't really be a big thing. Anyway, speaking of money, Alan, let's have a conversation for today's episode. We're recording this. Obviously, this is coming out on August the 13th, but I want to talk a little bit about this past Sunday at First Baptist and talk a little bit about our sermon content. We're going book by book, we preach book by book here, and we go verse by verse. And so this past Sunday, we looked at 1 Corinthians chapter 9. We looked at the first 14 verses. And so this was our 22nd sermon. So it took us 21 sermons to get to chapter 9. Before we talk about chapter 9, your overall thoughts, we are halfway now through 1 Corinthians. Your overall thoughts on our series through 1 Corinthians so far?
well, I think First Corinthians gives us a wealth of information, a wealth of guidance. I think there's a lot of insights on the early churches.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of parallels that today's church can draw from exactly what we've heard so far. I think that it is a major significance that it is Corinth.
Yeah.
That was kind of a world leader, so to speak, of the day.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a significance in that. I think that that is a direct parallel to where we are today. We have the opportunity to be that world leader. And unfortunately, I believe we're letting the world down.
You're talking Big C Church.
Correct.
Yeah, gotcha. I do think, and I'm bragging here and probably biased and all those things. I apologize. I do think our church specifically is a leader in this community. I do think that you will find, and this is not a bad thing, I'm not upset at anybody for this, but I think that you will find other churches, if you watch them closely enough, if you watch them on social media and you watch their websites, they do tend to use some of our methods. And so the way I know that is a lot of our methods are not like they're just brand new. They either come out of my head, your head, somebody's head, somebody in our congregation. And so you do see that a lot. And I'm not naming names or anything, but there's around 8 or 10 churches that are in close proximity with us. And so I do think that is exciting that we can be that kind of leader in our church area, but too much is given, much is required. And I think that comes with it. We're in the top 10 of pretty much every category in the Lexington Baptist Association. And so I think that's what should be expected of a top 10 church, so to speak. And I'm not saying that to puff our heads or anything. I'm just saying that with the reality of the ministry influence we've been given.
Well, I'd like to get a little deeper in that, and like you said, the ideas, the fact that people come up with those ideas, tell me that they are in a deeper walk,
Mm-hmm.
that they are actively concerned with reaching, that they are engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's huge. And so, we've been going verse by verse, and I think what the book of Corinthians gives us is a lot of practical understanding. Paul was aggravated with the Corinthians. I think that's a good word. There's a lot of sarcasm and sass that he's used thus far, and I think that's okay. I think that he wanted them to behave better. He planted them. He earlier on in Corinthians, he says that he was their spiritual father. I think that's important to remember. So the thing about Corinthians 2, I'm just going to go through briefly a little bit of some of the titles that we've had so far to give our listeners kind of a viewpoint of how pointed he is. And so if you'll go back to chapter 7 in our study of Corinthians, you'll remember, Alan, that he says, not verbatim, but that he says, hey, I'm pretty much answering your questions. And so they had sent him some questions, and so we don't have all of the letters. We only have two. There were four total, and we don't have any of the Corinthians letters of what they sent. But obviously, from the very beginning, I'm giving a short synopsis here. In the very beginning, Paul, not beginning of Genesis, but in the very beginning of Corinthians, he mentioned the fact that there was a four-way split, right? Apollos, Peter, Paul, Jesus. Different people in the church were following different teachers because we believe Apollos was there for a while. Peter probably came along. We talked about the split they went through. We talked about the mission of the cross. Weak made strong, not by human might. There's a lot of theology that he goes through. He goes through the Spirit of God. Then in chapter 3, he kind of slows down, and I entitled that, Why Can't We All Just Get Along? He wanted them to get along. He wanted them to do their job. In 1 Corinthians 3, verses 10 through 15, he talks about your ministry enduring the fire, right? Is your ministry fireproof, essentially? And then he talks about how he was called to be a pastor, and he gives several proofs of that, and we looked at that. He then hits on pride in chapter 4. He talks about spiritual fathers, all kind of different things. Then in chapter 6, we really start to get into some specific things. Those first 4 to 5 chapters are about division, unity, and doctrine, right? And so you really, he talks a lot about doctrine, a lot about the cross, a lot about getting along, a lot about loving each other. And then in chapter 6, it gets a little uncomfortable because he starts talking about how you shouldn't sue other Christians. And so he was undoubtedly aware that some of the believers in the church in Corinth had decided to sue other believers in Corinth. And so he's very clear you shouldn't do that. And then in the rest of chapter 6, he starts talking about the human body, and he gives a blueprint for it. In chapter 7, we looked at God's plan for sex inside of marriage, so you can see how pointed these are getting. Then he talks about your calling, what God has called you to, whether that's to be single, whether that's to be married, and we talked about that. And then he talked about the danger of what you don't know, obviously being stumbling blocks and things of that nature. He talks about widows and widowers. And then this past Sunday, he starts talking about money. And so he talks about money in regards to a pastor in verses 1 through 14. And then in verses 15 through 18, not this Sunday, but the next Sunday, because I'm going to pause and give an evangelistic message for Sunday. I think that's appropriate. I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the guys on our football team might not have a relationship with Jesus. Obviously, I don't know that for sure. In talking about that, the very next Sunday that we're in Corinthians, we're going to look at money and mayhem, right? And so there is mayhem with money, right? And so as Paul discussed in verses 1 through 14, there are times where it's okay and there are times where it's not in verses 15 through 18. So anyway, so that's kind of where we are right now in our study of Corinthians, kind of catch people up. You can find all of those sermons on our YouTube channel, and I've got one that wasn't in the playlist. I'm going to go ahead and make sure the superpower of saved singles. Don't know if you remember that one, Alan, but
Yep.
that one's gonna. I've got to put that one in the playlist, which I'll do shortly. But anyway, so we talked about money in the ministry, and very shortly to kind of indicate what we were talking about, we talked about the office, outward living, oxen, and the law, and our Lord's teaching. And so, kind of the theme of verse 9, where the rubber meets the road, at least for me, is in verse 8 of chapter 9 of First Corinthians, where it says, "Do I say these things on human authority? Does not the law say the same? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain." And so I've heard this before, and obviously I brought it out in the sermon Sunday. But if an ox is working the plow, it should be able to eat, right? Treading the grain, so to speak. And so just kind of want to get your initial thoughts on the sermon before we go into a little bit deeper dive on it.
Well, I think everybody understands, or at least everybody should understand, that everybody lives a different life, and we don't know what people bring to the table. Even people that I've known for years and are what I would consider close friends carry things differently. It might be something as simple as just a difficult day at work, or it might be an ongoing health crisis, or caring for an aging parent or a child that uh, may be facing uh, some hardships. And so we don't always have the benefit. Probably the person in each congregation that has the most public life is the pastor.
I can
We've
I can verify that.
we've always expected that. For whatever reason, we feel like we're paying this guy, we have a right to his life. And I don't know that that is necessarily correct 100%. I believe that you should work your worth, but there's got to be times you disconnect. There's got to be times that you are unreachable.
Correct.
That's sanity. More than likely, 50 years from now, in your life, the people that's going to be supporting you through old age, through all the things that come with that era of your life, the loss of parents, maybe caring for parents, wayward children, whatever it is, I dare say there's probably not more than one or two people in this congregation now that will even know that, much less support you through that. The person that will support you through that is Hannah.
Hmm.
And so you need to be sure that you make time for that. Took me a long time to figure that out. Um, you know, you always think the things that you're interested in are more important than the things that your spouse are interested in.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to figure that out, and I would like to think I'm a little better at it now than I was when I was 20 years old. But again, a pastor is a person. So I look back at my school career, more particularly my high school career. I was not a good student. I did not take it seriously. I, like most kids don't.
Robert Maddox didn't rub off on you?
He did not rub off on me. I did. He was one of the kids that I called a friend. And all of us turn out much better than we do in high school in most cases. But I look at my teachers at the end of the year, and some of them are like, I hope I've done something to help you. And some of them are like, I tried my best and you're still hopeless.
Mm.
And I equate that to the feelings of a pastor who leads his congregation Sunday after Sunday in biblical teaching, how to treat each other, how to treat others, and constantly is bombarded by people that don't do that.
Yeah.
I think a pastor deals a lot with disappointment.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
And I feel like we as congregation a lot of times don't really feel that. And I don't know how to make that better. I mean, we are human.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we are going to fail. We're going to fall daily, multiple times a day. And I think about the people in my life that I fail almost daily. And so I, I feel like that probably disappointment, a sense of betrayal, I can see those happening on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of that, and I think some of that has some validity to it. I think it's important to always remember who has called you, and of course, we serve God and not man. But kind of as we talked about on Wednesday, we still got to eat. Pastors still got to eat and have clothes and things of that nature. So one thing I didn't do Sunday was I didn't put a price tag. I didn't put an idea of a salary or a package, and so I've gotten questions about that, and I don't answer those. I just give them the website. Lifeway does a compensation, what do you call it, survey, and they do that every year. For years, I did it. I was the Lone Ranger, and so I quit doing it because everybody knew it was me because I was the only guy in South Carolina under the age of 25 who was a senior pastor. So now I can do it again because they categorize. I'm now in the category of 26 to 35, so I can blend in a little bit more there, but I could not before. And so this by no means is me saying what our church needs to do. As I said Sunday, and I said it multiple times, you guys take care of me. You guys do a great job, and my wife and I are extremely thankful. But I do want you to know what some of those large scale numbers are in regards to how pastors are being paid across the Southern Baptist Convention, and so how that works. And so this is not, again, this is not me saying this is how we need to do it. This is just me saying here are the facts, and you can look these up for yourself. Research.lifeway.com/compensation data. Research.lifeway.com/compensation data, and you can look these up. I will say Baptists as a whole pay less than Presbyterians. And I didn't know that until I did the research that Presbyterians are a little bit more that way. But anyway, so there's all kind of different scales that I'll give you. First, I'm going to start with the United States as a whole. For senior full-time pastors, 2,719 entries into this data. And so you're going to know this more than the average person, Alan. So this does not consider church size. This doesn't consider anything. This is just full-time pastors, and we'll break it down by category. So compensation, when I use the word compensation, that's salary. Pay package is usually insurance and retirement. And so when I say compensation package, I'm talking essentially salary and housing allowance. The other is, well, actually, no. Compensation package is just salary. When you do pay package, that's housing allowance, insurance, and benefits, usually all together. So the average pastor's salary is $75,000 with the pay package being 86. And so that's kind of where that is. The 75th percentile for salary is 98. The 25th, 98,000. The 25th percentile is 58. The 75th percentile for pay package is 116. So that would mean 98 of that pastor is a salary, 116 is the pay package. So that's all of that for that. People ask all the time, bivocational pastors, which my dad is, the median compensation, so the median salary, they usually don't get pay packages. Poor guys, I hate it for them. 25,700 is usually that for bivocational. Here's an interesting one. There were 29 entries for this one, Alan, interim pastors. I know we've talked about this before. The average compensation for an interim pastor is $31,000 with the pay package being $35,000. Most of the time those guys are already drawing retirement, so you can kind of see why that would be the case there. Okay, full-time staff member. So this would be a full-time youth pastor, full-time children's minister, full-time minister of music. The 75th percentile on salary is $81,121. The total compensation average is 65,000. The 25th percentile is 52,500, and the total pay package average for a full-time minister is 78,929. All right, let's go to South Carolina. That might be a little more up to our speed. And so, South Carolina, there were a total of 118 full-time senior pastors who filled out this deal. And so, again, this is not church size, even though we will get to church size. The average salary for a full-time pastor in the state of South Carolina, $77,575. The average pay package for a South Carolina full-time pastor is $89,556. The 75th percentile for salary is 101,538, with a pay package in the 75th percentile of 122,045. So that's kind of where that is. The average minister in South Carolina, minister of music, full-time youth pastor, whatever, is usually 65,758 with a pay package of 76. So that's kind of where that is. So let's talk about church size. And this, it's got all kind of things. I really encourage you to go look at this on your own. It's got research.lifeway.com/compensation data. This is not me trying to do anything manipulative. This is just me showing you, because I have people ask me all the time, what's something that I can look at that shows what pastors are paid across the country. This is a really good resource. So let's go to church size. So our church size is in the 200 to 299. All right, so only 19 pastors filled this out, gave this. So in that category, the average pay package is 80. The 75th percentile page package is 92,283. So we're pretty much right in line with a lot of that. And for our church size in the state of South Carolina, here's a fun one. Let's go to ages. Let's go to 26 to 35, because that's my age. And then I'm going to play around and go to the older guys. No offense, older guys. So this is interesting. This is not including church size, because we just did our church size and we're in line with that. So here's the not church size, but just the ages. So there's 9 senior pastors that filled this out. So it's not a very large data size, but 25 to 35. And so the average salary for 25 to 35-year-old senior pastor in our state is $95,000 with a pay package of $100,000. This is crazy. The salary for in the 75th percentile is $125 and a pay package of $167. That's kind of hard to believe there. A little high, especially for the ages, in my opinion. But there are 27 full-time ministers that filled it out, and then their salary medium is 56. So let's look at ages 56 to 65, which is really interesting. Senior pastors, 32 of them. Average salary is 72 with a pay package of 83. That's pretty normal. And so that's kind of weird that the data was that high for young guys, I think. That's a little weird, especially the 167 pay package. That's pretty high. So 66 and up, the average is 64. You say, why? A lot of your smaller churches have older pastors. I don't know what that is, but that's been that way a long time. So let's see if there's anybody in the up to 25. Yep, there is. There's 6 people. That's not me anymore. So that's good. But anyway, so that's a little bit of data. I encourage you to look at it for yourself. There's all kind of different things. You can look at different states and different things. South Carolina is pretty much around the average, though, a little bit higher than the average around the United States. So pretty interesting to look at that. If you ever need help, if you're ever on a personnel committee or you're ever on a stewardship team, you just don't really know where to start. You just want to pull a number out of thin air. This does give you a good resource, I would think.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people kind of tend to, we all shy away from surveys, and I'm just as guilty as the next person. But oftentimes surveys are a used for planning. I had an example when I was working. I had a guy that worked for me, and his work ethic was just off the chain. I mean, I never had to worry about what he was doing, how he was doing it. And I happened to stop by the office one day. I'd left something in there that I wanted during the weekend. It was a Saturday, and I stopped by. and he was in there just plugging away. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, I did all this stuff last week, and I found out late Friday afternoon that somebody had changed something and it was all wrong. And starting Tuesday morning, everything that we have for Tuesday morning is not going to air correctly. And so I'm just trying to catch up. And I'm like, well, be sure you put your time on your timesheet. My guys had to fill out timesheets.
Gotcha.
And he's like, no, I don't, I was like, no. I was like, you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
This is not about pay.
Yeah.
This is not about you. Me and everybody above me need to understand exactly what it takes to do this job.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not always about the compensation or whatever, but that data allows us to plan better. It allows us to be closer on our numbers, be more accurate with our numbers in planning our budgets, in planning our how we move in the future. Do we do this or do we do that? Well, based on we know it's going to take this amount of people, and consequently, when God's working on your life and you're looking for a place to serve,
Mm-hmm.
you need to know what it takes to do that job. You need to know what support you have for doing that job. And as a church, as we are facing a year, we need to be able to say, you know what, maybe we do need another teacher.
Yeah.
Maybe we need another leader in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, most times churches recognize that, but they don't have the people
Yeah.
that are willing to do it that are qualified.
Or they recognize it too late, right?
Yep.
Two sides of that. All right. Well, we've talked a little longer than we're used to, but thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Menorah Podcast. Episode 117 is what you just listened to on the podcast that seeks to share the light, speak the light, and send the light of Jesus Christ all across the airways of the internet. We will see you next Thursday. We're going to talk about some of our guest preachers for revival. We'll see you next week.